Hey guys, tonight we walk barefoot into a realm scented with cloves, sandalwood, sweat, and just a delicate hint of cow dung. Because what's history without a pinch of realism? The sky above is still a deep velvet, flecked here and there by fading stars, and you're stepping cautiously across a dusty courtyard toward one of medieval India's most secretive spice markets. Yes, the one nobody wrote travel brochures about. Partly because there were no brochures, and partly because, honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a stroll here without a serious tolerance for chaos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know down in the comments where you're from and what time it is there, because I'm oddly fascinated by geography at bedtime. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice about the market is the way your bare feet sink slightly into the fine, powdery dust. It's still cool from the night's rest, though you can feel the coming heat already whispering promises of afternoon discomfort. The ground here isn't paved or even particularly level, just worn down by centuries of sandals, hooves and paws, all trotting in search of something tasty or profitable. You glance around, taking in the scenery. Low mud brick buildings painted in earthy shades of ochre and whitewash. Wooden stalls sagging slightly under the weight of yesterday's bargains. And a lazy assortment of sleeping dogs and bored cows who seem completely indifferent to your presence. A rooster crows in the distance, though he sounds almost hesitant, as if unsure whether it's worth waking everyone up again so soon. And then there's the air itself, thick, warm, and layered with fragrances so intense they practically coat your tongue. Sandalwood and clove dominate, interwoven with undertones of pungent black pepper, sweet cinnamon, and something sharp and biting, possibly ginger. Underneath all these aromatic notes floats a base of simpler, earthier scents, dust, smoke from cooking fires, manure, and human sweat. You might wrinkle your nose, but this was the true aroma of commerce, and frankly, there were no air fresheners available in medieval marketplaces. Slowly, figures emerge from shadowed doorways and alleyways, stepping into the market's main square. Merchants and traders stretch and yawn with an unhurried rhythm that mirrors your own sleepy pace. Nobody's rushing. Why bother when the spices have been traveling for weeks or even months just to get here? If the peppercorn survived pirates, monsoon storms, and overly curious elephants, they could certainly wait a little longer to find their new homes. From one corner of the market drifts a gentle murmur, voices engaged in sleepy bartering, not yet fully awake. You spot a stall owner lazily inspecting a bundle of cinnamon sticks, raising them to his nose and inhaling deeply, perhaps checking freshness or just savoring the smell himself. Nearby, two young boys quietly sweep yesterday's scattered spices into neat little piles of gold, brown, and rust red. Historians still argue whether these spices were truly worth their weight in gold, or if medieval traders simply had a talent for exaggeration. Either way, as you glance around, you can't deny the magic in their fragrance and color, the allure that drew empires to fight, explorers to sail unknown seas, and sleepy travelers like yourself to wander barefoot through marketplaces before dawn. Nearby, a merchant carefully arranges saffron threads onto a delicate bronze tray, his fingers gentle, almost reverent, as if each thread contained its own tiny universe. And maybe it did. After all, this tiny red filament had journeyed from distant Kashmir or Persia, carried over mountains and deserts, protected from thieves and dampness, just so you might someday sprinkle it into your rice or tea, assuming you were wealthy enough to afford such luxuries, of course. Another vendor, older and grumbling quietly to himself, sets out glass jars filled with mysterious powders labeled only by their colors. Rust red, bright yellow, earthy brown, each hue signifying a different spice, a different use, a different story. Was that turmeric, used for cooking and healing wounds, or chili powder, capable of making grown warriors cry into their lentil stews? Probably both, knowing the mischievous nature of medieval spice merchants. Just then, a soft breeze stirs, rustling the loose cloth awnings above your head, releasing tiny clouds of spice dust. You sneeze softly, earning yourself a mildly amused glance from an elderly woman wrapping herself tighter in her faded shawl. Clearly, only newcomers sneezed at spice dust. Locals, by contrast, seemed to breathe it like oxygen, unaffected by the constant peppery tickle. You continue your stroll, careful to avoid stepping on the sleeping cat sprawled luxuriously in the middle of the walkway, clearly indifferent to the spice-dusted feet stepping gingerly around it. The cat opens one lazy eye, assesses you briefly as harmless or hopeless, or perhaps both, before returning to its dreams, which undoubtedly involve slow mice and spilled milk. Overhead, the sky has shifted subtly from velvet black to a deep, bruised purple, hinting at the sunrise soon to come. Stallholders move a bit quicker now, more awake, sensing the coming wave of eager buyers, cooks, and noble household servants who'd soon arrive to haggle and sample. But for these last few moments, the market still belonged mostly to the night, to the quiet murmurs, and to you, a traveler from another era, caught briefly in this aromatic crossroads of history. Before long, a faint orange glow touches the rooftops, illuminating them like thin slices of ginger against the fading night sky. Soon, you'll be just another face in the swelling crowd, another voice blending into the rising chatter and noise. But for now, you simply pause, breathing in deeply one last time, savoring the mingled aromas of spices and dust, aware that each breath is a tiny taste of history itself. After all, how often do you get to inhale 1,000 years of trade, conquest, culture, and fragrant absurdity all at once? You shift your weight slightly, the thin film of dust clinging now to the soles of your feet like an earthy reminder that you're not just the visitor, you're part of this moment, if only temporarily. Before you, almost camouflaged in the textured shadows of a crumbling courtyard wall, you notice a curious little door. Not a grand entrance, not a display for pomp or showmanship, just a small arched panel of woven teak, weathered by decades of monsoon, sun, and the occasional wayward goat headbutt. There's no sign, no bell, no open for business. Yet, from behind it wafts something unmistakably rich, a fusion of toasted cumin, dried rose petals, and something sharper, citrusy, almost metallic. You hesitate. Is this a shop? A shrine? A trap? Then, as if answering your thoughts, a parrot perched on a wooden crossbeam squawks softly. Not a warning, but an invitation. He blinks at you, head tilted sideways, as if to say, if you know, you know. And apparently, you do. You duck through the threshold. Inside, the light changes instantly. Outside, the market was soft, diffuse, touched by pre-dawn. But here, sunlight struggles through thin slits in the latticework, scattering golden rays like spilled turmeric across the floor. The space is smaller than you expected, more room than shop. A single narrow path winds between densely packed baskets and barrels, each overflowing with mystery. The air is thicker here, headier, carrying notes that seem to swirl around your ears rather than your nose. Dry basil, cardamom, fennel, crushed petals, sandal ash. This is no ordinary stall. You've entered a trader's den, a hidden enclave known only to a few, regulars, relatives, and those with a sharp eye for parrot body language. A man you hadn't seen before appears from behind a curtain of dried lemongrass strands. He's barefoot too, with a knee-length dhoti wrapped tightly around narrow hips and a forehead streaked with red sandal paste. His face, though lined by time, carries the sort of serenity only someone surrounded by spices could possess. "Ah," he murmurs, as though your presence was prophesied. "You came through the bird door." You nod because, frankly, that sounds accurate. The man gestures slowly toward a long, low shelf, upon which rest a dozen earthenware jars, each sealed with wax and marked with simple ink symbols, a flame, a crescent moon, a spiral. You wonder if these are merchant codes or remnants of some forgotten language. He selects one, marked with a curling symbol that might be a snake or perhaps a spilled noodle, and opens it with a quiet pop. Instantly, a rush of clove floods the space. Not the sharp, biting clove you might know from toothaches or holiday cookies, but something rounder, almost creamy, with the barest suggestion of tobacco. He dips 2 fingers in, scoops a small mound, and gestures for you to smell. You lean in, breathe deeply, and immediately feel a tingling behind your eyes. Not pain, not even discomfort, just a sudden vividness, as though your senses were wiped clean and rewired for a different century. Clove, it turned out, wasn't just for flavor or scent. In medieval India, clove was currency, medicine, aphrodisiac, and occasionally murder weapon. Historians still argue whether the rumor of a Mughal prince dying from a clove overdose was real or just slander from a jealous cousin with access to a scroll and a grudge. Either way, the potency of this little brown bud was never underestimated. You open your mouth but realize you don't quite know the etiquette. Is this barter? Do you need to offer something? You pat yourself down and quite helpfully find nothing. No coins, no beads, not even a pouch of dried chickpeas. You're about to stammer out a polite refusal when he waves a hand. "Don't worry," he says, "only smell today." Relieved, you follow him deeper into the room, which now reveals itself to be longer than expected. The corridor curves gently, leading to a courtyard not visible from outside. And here, in this secret sun-drenched pocket of the world, lie heaps, literal heaps of spices, sorted by color, texture, and likely moon phase. Mountains of golden turmeric shimmer next to puddles of indigo dye. Strings of dried red chilies hang like spicy garlands, gently swaying in the breeze stirred by lazy ceiling fans. Mace, with its fiery, lace-like patterns, spills across a reed mat in tangled elegance. And beneath the canopy of banana leaves rests a collection of vanilla beans so plump and dark they could pass for relics. Near the back, a woman sits cross-legged with a shallow stone grinder, methodically pressing coriander seeds into a coarse paste. Her arms move in slow circles, steady and hypnotic. You're tempted to sit beside her, to simply watch, maybe nap, maybe ask her how she keeps her nails so clean while surrounded by turmeric dust. This courtyard, this hidden garden of spice and steam, isn't just a market. It's a memory bank, a whisper of trade routes, family feuds, rainy seasons, and quietly exchanged recipes. Every jar and basket holds a story, a secret, or a scandal buried beneath layers of cardamom. At one point, a small boy toddles past, carrying what looks like a coconut shell filled with star anise. He doesn't say a word, just beams at you and disappears behind a curtain of ginger roots. A dog follows him, tail wagging lazily. Neither seems concerned about what time it is. They've likely been living among these aromas since birth, immune to their spell, or perhaps forever enchanted by them. A parrot flutters in through a skylight, lands with a quiet rustle on a mango wood perch, and preens itself casually. You wonder if it's the same parrot from earlier. It's hard to say. All parrots look vaguely judgmental when they squint at you. Somewhere nearby, a low bell rings, followed by 3 short whistles, an internal signal perhaps, or just someone summoning a cup of masala chai. Either way, the courtyard begins to hum slightly louder, like a great spice-scented beehive warming up for the day. It occurs to you, gently and without urgency, that this moment won't last forever. The city will wake up, the official stalls will open, the crowds will return. But here, for now, you're tucked in a hidden fold of history,
a little ripple of time where cinnamon breathes and nutmeg listens. You take one last deep breath, letting your lungs expand with the air of coriander and clove, and let it out slowly. It doesn't just smell like spice, it smells like home, or at least a version of it imagined by ancient cooks and sleepy travelers. Then, with one final glance at the quiet courtyard, the grinding woman, and the parrot who might or might not be judging your life choices, you step back through the lattice gate. The world outside feels a bit brighter. The market has begun to swell with noise and motion, but you've been somewhere else, through the bird door, and now you carry a little bit of that secret garden with you.
The bustle outside the hidden courtyard has grown louder, though it still has that slow, stretched rhythm of a city rubbing sleep from its eyes. You find yourself drifting toward a row of stalls whose owners are just beginning to unfurl their cloth canopies, revealing woven baskets, dusty jars, and bundles wrapped in old linen. You aren't sure where your feet are taking you, but something in the air pulls you. A dry sweetness layered with metallic tang, and just a whisper of copper? You stop in front of a man who's crouched low behind a table. He wears an orange turban that seems too large for his head, its folds flopping dramatically whenever he moves, and his mustache is combed so precisely that it could probably slice cinnamon bark. On the cloth before him, he lays out small squares of rough cotton, each dusted in a fine reddish-brown powder. He hums to himself as he works, entirely unfazed by the rising din around him. Curious, you lean closer. It's cinnamon, or more specifically, cinnamon dust, shaved down so fine it might as well be smoke. The smell is unmistakable, sweet, woody, with a hint of clove hiding behind the bark. But what catches your eye isn't the spice itself, it's what's glinting beneath the powder. Coins. Dozens of copper coins, dulled and stained from time, sit beneath thin layers of cinnamon. The man sprinkles more dust atop them and gently rubs with the corner of his cloth. The copper shines faintly, as if waking up from a long nap. He looks up suddenly and grins. "It's not cleaning," he says, gesturing to the powder. "It's disguise." You blink. Disguise? He nods. People weigh the smell, not the metal. And just like that, you tumble into a bizarre little corner of spice history that you never expected. Back in the day, whatever century this slippery market likes to pretend it's in, cinnamon wasn't just seasoning. It was prestige, medicine, offering, and sometimes distraction, particularly for coin counterfeiters. In tight times, some clever individuals learned to coat lightweight or impure copper coins with potent spices like cinnamon or crushed nutmeg. The aroma distracted buyers, and the visual camouflage helped dull imperfections. A clever trick when you're short on real currency, but long on spice dust. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just a market myth told by old men in orange turbans with mischievous eyes. Some say only desperate traders ever bothered. Others claim royal courts once used it to stretch their coinage without stirring revolt. Either way, it's a story that smells good, and that counts for something in a world where currency and aroma often traveled the same routes. You glance back at the coins, they don't look impressive. Just ordinary metal browned with age and scuffed by hundreds of transactions. But the cinnamon gives them a kind of reverence. It's not gold, but it fools the eye. More importantly, it fools the nose. And in a society where spices were once worth more than silver, that made all the difference. The vendor leans in slightly. "Want to see the trick?" Of course, you nod. Who wouldn't? He pulls out 2 coins. One is heavier, darker, real. The other is light, shiny, just a little too perfect. He rubs the fake one with cinnamon, polishes it gently, then drops it on the table beside the real coin. You stare. The smell hits first, warm and spicy, enough to pull your focus. You look again. In the dim market light, the 2 coins are almost indistinguishable. "Only fools bite metal," he mutters. "The smart ones sniff." He laughs at his own joke. You can't help but smile too. In this part of the world, where memory is oral and wisdom is wrapped in jokes, it's impossible to tell if he's a charlatan or a philosopher. Maybe both. He wraps one of the cinnamon-coated coins in a square of cloth and hands it to you. "A souvenir," he says, "but don't try to buy lunch with it. You might get curry poured on your head." You tuck it away with a nod of thanks, the cloth warm in your hand, still releasing tiny bursts of spice as you walk. Further down the path, another stall catches your attention. Less elaborate, but with a peculiar display. Lines of string are hung like laundry between two poles, and dangling from them are spoons. Not just any spoons, flat wooden ones dipped in something dark and sticky, their bowls caked in thick spice paste. The vendor, a squat woman with henna-stained hands and a half-eaten banana in her mouth, notices your confusion. "Currency," she says, chewing. "Tasting spoons. People use these to smell before buying. Then they leave them. I hang the good ones." You peer closer. Sure enough, each spoon carries a different note. One has a deep clove hit. Another reeks gloriously of cumin and roasted fenugreek. A third is so aggressively gingery that you flinch just inhaling near it. It's a reminder that in this world, where spices meant power, even the smallest tools became relics of commerce. A spoon was not just a spoon. It was a sample, a certificate, a small olfactory contract. And in the right market, the aroma on a spoon could be more persuasive than any printed label or silver tongue. You wander on, your mind fogged in the most delightful way. The heat is rising now, subtle but steady. A bead of sweat slides down your back, joining the mixture of smells in the air like yet another note in an ever-expanding perfume. You think again about the cinnamon coins, about the spoon contracts, about the invisible systems that made this place work. No signage, no apps, no receipts, just sense, memory, and maybe a parrot to lead the way. A camel grunts in the distance, dragging a cart laden with sacks marked in chalk symbols. More cinnamon, perhaps, or cloves, or just plain sand dressed up in fragrant lies. You wouldn't be surprised anymore. Here, in the heart of the hidden market, you realize the trade is not just about value. It's about illusion, experience, and trust woven with deception. Like dreams, really. Things don't need to be true. They just need to be believable long enough to sell. You step into the shade of a banyan tree, your feet dusty, your hands tinged with spice, your mind spinning slowly like a lazy ceiling fan. The cinnamon coin rests in your pocket, light as a lie, fragrant as a fable. And just like that, you've become a little piece of the market's own magic. One more story wrapped in spice.
The spice market is swelling with life now, and you can feel its pulse underfoot. Through the thuds of footsteps, the soft curses of vendors untying stubborn knots, and the rustle of sacks being lifted and opened. You follow the rhythm instinctively, drawn toward a corridor of stalls where the colors are warmer, deeper. Shawls dyed in turmeric yellows and chilly reds hang from wooden poles like flags in a forgotten parade. And beneath them, women sit cross-legged behind baskets and bowls, their hands moving with mechanical grace, grinding, mixing, measuring. They're older, mostly, faces lined with sun and time, skin the shade of roasted cumin. Some are silent, working without pause, while others speak in low, deliberate tones, negotiating prices or gossiping in dialects thick with spice and sleep. Their shawls are stained the same colors as their wares, streaks of saffron, patches of indigo, threads of black pepper clinging stubbornly to the fringe. You pause near one such woman. Her eyes flick to you briefly, then return to her work. She's separating cardamom pods, green from black, plump from hollow, with the efficiency of someone who has done this since before you were born, possibly since before anyone was born, if the wrinkles around her knuckles are to be believed. Without looking up, she speaks. Looking by? Her voice is soft, but there's an edge to it. Not suspicion, more like expectation. You admit you're just browsing. She snorts. Everyone's just browsing until their nose tells them otherwise. You like her already. She shifts her basket toward you. Inside are 3 mounds of cardamom. One green, like early spring, another dark and dry, the third nearly white, bleached by time or sun or mystery. She taps each one lightly. This, daily cooking. That, for prayer. And this, she hesitates, for debts. Debts? She shrugs. When someone owes but gold would shame them, they bring spice. A handful of cardamom makes peace better than any coin. You look again at the pots. They do look elegant. Tiny capsules of oil and flavor, each one a little fragrant apology. And it makes sense. In a society where face is worth more than fortune, where shame can linger longer than bad curry, spices become more than food. They become symbols, currency, a way out. Historians still debate the full extent of spice-based bartering. Some say cardamom and pepper were used to settle dowries, pay taxes, even bribe officials in times when silver was scarce. Others argue that such tales were exaggerated, romanticized in old travelogues to make India seem more exotic to bored European readers with weak digestion and even weaker imaginations. You choose to believe the cardamom woman. Another vendor nearby calls out, waving a bundle of dried mangoes high in the air like a flag in a forgotten parade. Salted mango, 2 for 1. Trade for pepper. Trade for eggs. Trade for gossip. A man steps forward, pulling from his satchel a sack that jingles not with coins, but with something softer. He unties it and reveals a cascade of small black peppercorns, each one polished like obsidian. They negotiate, slowly, carefully. Words pass back and forth like chess moves. Finally, the vendor nods. The mangoes are handed over. The pepper disappears. You blink. You just witnessed a transaction measured not in rupees or tokens, but in culinary ambition. You're not sure who got the better deal, but it probably doesn't matter. Both walked away satisfied, and probably a little hungry.
You stroll further, past rows of women pounding garlic into paste, drying ginger on cloths, and stringing cloves like beads on a necklace. One woman catches your eye, not because of her work, but her expression. She's smiling faintly, humming a lullaby as she grinds something in a heavy stone bowl. You approach, and she looks up. "Try," she says, offering you a pinch of the orange-red paste she's made. You hesitate. "It's not for eating," she clarifies. "For smell, for memory." You sniff. It's pungent, chili maybe, tamarind, something fermented and rich and oddly comforting. "I make this when my son is away," she says. "When I miss him, I grind what he loves. Then it's like he's home again." You nod slowly, unsure of what to say. "Spice remembers," she adds. And maybe that's the quiet truth of this entire place. Spices, unlike gold or jewels, don't just sit in vaults or shine on rings. They linger. They cling to fingertips, waft through windows, stain your clothes, your dreams, your stories. They feed the mouth, yes, but also the heart. You think again of the women seated here, not passive vendors, but architects of the invisible economy, one where coin might bend, but flavor never lies. In many medieval towns, women, especially widows and older matriarchs, ran the spice stalls. They weren't just sellers, they were gatekeepers. They knew who could afford saffron, who faked their turmeric, who watered down their rosewater. They remembered your debts better than any accountant, and they expected payment, preferably in kind or kindness. There's an old proverb scratched into a market wall nearby, half hidden by a garland of marigolds. If you owe a woman pepper, pay her in cloves. but never try to cheat her of both. Sage advice. A shout breaks the calm. Down the alley, a younger merchant is arguing over the weight of a ginger root. The woman beside you doesn't flinch. Let them yell, she says. Noise is part of the flavor. You smile. She waves you off with a flick of her wrist, returning to her grinding. Her rhythm resumes, steady and slow, as if she's not just preparing spice, but turning time itself under her hands. You move on, richer in scent and sentiment than any coin purse could hold. At the far edge of the row, you spot something unexpected, a small shrine tucked beneath a neem tree. It's surrounded not by candles or coins, but by offerings of spice. A bowl of turmeric, a pile of dried mint, 3 perfect cloves lined up with eerie precision. The deity is unfamiliar, perhaps a local guardian, painted with faded red pigment and adorned in a garland of pepper vines. Someone has placed a single coconut shell filled with cardamom oil beside the statue, its surface reflecting the early sun. You pause, lowering your head out of instinct or respect, or maybe just awe at how deeply spice runs through every layer of life here, from economy to memory, from meals to rituals, from forgiveness to worship. And as you turn away, you realize something. Your pockets may be empty, but your senses, those ancient, underestimated instruments, are overflowing. And in this market, that's more than enough.
The sun is climbing now, no longer shy, and the dusty pathways of the spice market are glowing gold with its light. You feel it on your neck, a soft warmth growing by the minute. The market is no longer waking. It is fully alive, humming, pulsing, and entirely unapologetic about it. Merchants call out in sing-song tones. Donkeys jostle past with sacks on their backs. A child shrieks in delight or despair over a dropped date. And somewhere in the distance, a tabla rhythm thumps out a heartbeat for the street. You drift, as one does when the world is too rich to rush through. Your senses tug you left, then right, as new sense interrupts your thoughts. And suddenly, you find yourself before a stall where the air is unmistakably sweet, like fruit left just long enough in the sun to become something bolder, darker, and stranger. Dried mangoes, salted, rubbed with spices and strung on twine like festive decorations or edible wind chimes. They sway gently in the breeze, casting their aroma in lazy spirals. A woman stands behind the stall, her arms crossed, her head wrapped in layers of deep maroon fabric. She narrows her eyes at you, not unfriendly, just calculating. "You here to look or to trade?" she asks. You start to answer but falter. You're not sure anymore. "What do you even have to trade?" She smirks. "Everyone's got something." And beside her stands a man, older, lean, his turban tilting precariously. He holds a cloth bundle, which he gently sets on the table. From it, he pours out a spill of black peppercorns. Not many, maybe 2 handfuls, but they're shiny, heavy-looking, and so intensely aromatic you feel your eyes sting a little. "Goat and a half," the woman says flatly. The man's face doesn't twitch. He points to the mango strings. "2 strings for this," he counters. She picks up a single peppercorn, bites it, chews thoughtfully. 1 string and 2 ginger slabs. The man nods. A deal. You watch, slightly stunned, as they exchange goods in complete silence now. Not a coin in sight, just mango for pepper, flavor for flavor. It's somehow more intimate than money. There's a rhythm to it, a kind of ancient poetry that exists only in markets like these where people have bartered for longer than kings have ruled. Historians still debate the economic sophistication of these barter systems. Some argue they were primitive, inefficient, waiting for the invention of coinage to elevate them. Others, more recently, recognized their elegance, a flavor-based economy that understood value as something flexible, situational, even emotional. Pepper might be priceless in one season and worthless the next. A good mango, dried just right, could mean the difference between respect and insult. And ginger? Ginger was a wild card. You lean in to examine the ginger slabs. They're cut thick, dusted in sugar, and slightly translucent, like stained glass windows made of spice. You imagine biting into one and having your tongue burned and soothed in the same second. Want a slab? The woman asks, noticing your gaze. You nod. She picks one up with tongs and places it on a square of pressed palm leaf. You reach instinctively into your pocket for something to offer, only to remember that you have nothing. She watches your hesitation, then waves a hand. Tell someone about my mangoes. That's worth one slab. You smile, nod, and carefully take the gift.
It's heavy, warm from the sun, and sticky already. You resist the urge to eat it immediately. Instead, you tuck it carefully into your pouch beside the cinnamon coin. These small exchanges, mango for pepper, ginger for word of mouth, aren't just transactions. They're social glue. They build memory, reputation. They create debt, but not the kind you dread, the kind you honor, the kind you remember on rainy mornings when you pass a stall and think, ah yes, I owe her a story. You wander onward, ginger-scented and slightly enchanted. A boy darts past you, clutching a bundle of dried red chilies like a bouquet. He vanishes into a narrow alley where smoke curls upward from a clayed chimney, and you, naturally, follow. Here, the market narrows. It grows darker. The walls are taller, the stalls more haphazard, but the smell, oh, the smell is bold. Toasted spices, roasting seeds, a sizzling, savory scent that makes your stomach growl. You've stumbled into a part of the market that deals not in raw spice, but in mixtures. You pass a man grinding something in a stone mortar. His pestle moves in heavy, slow arcs, and the paste inside is dark, oily, flecked with seeds and peels. He offers you a dab on a fingertip. You try it. Salt, tamarind, chili, maybe dried pomegranate. It hits your tongue like a symphony. He nods approvingly. Trade? He asks. You shake your head. I have nothing. He shrugs. Next time. There is always a next time in this market. Further down, you come upon a woman arranging bowls of powder so vibrant they look like they were scooped from a rainbow. Each one is labeled with a simple symbol, a sun, a moon, a teardrop, a cow. She notices your curiosity. For balance, she says. Sun for the cold, moon for the restless, cow for the dry cough. She points to the teardrop. This one? She asks. For sorrow. You boil it with milk, makes your memories less sharp. You stare at it, this pale blue powder that promises to soften grief. Whether it works or not seems irrelevant. What matters is that someone believed it once, and that the belief was handed down with care. You ask if she made it herself. No, she replies. My grandmother's recipe. I only mix. She did the magic. You nod, and she hands you a pinch and a folded leaf. For later, she says. Your pouch is getting heavier now, not with wealth, but with gifts, spices, promises, pieces of people's lives wrapped in leaves and cloth. You emerge from the alley blinking, back into the open square where the sunlight seems almost rude in its brightness. You're grateful for the warmth, though. It carries the scent of your ginger slab and the mangoes you never quite got to buy. You sit for a moment on the edge of a stone trough, likely meant for horses, but currently occupied by 2 sleeping goats and a very alert rooster. You unwrap the ginger slab and bite. It burns. Then it soothes. Then it lingers. Just like everything else in this place. And you think, what an astonishing thing it is that flavor could do what gold cannot. Connect strangers, mend offenses, carry memory. Here, in this fragrant, chaotic, warm-blooded world of barter and scent, you're reminded that history isn't always grand battles or dusty scrolls. Sometimes, it's just 2 people trading a goat and a half's worth of pepper for a story told in dried mango.
You rise slowly, the ginger still warm on your tongue, and wipe your hands on the edge of your tunic. Around you, the market continues its morning crescendo, full of voices and colors and smells so rich they seem to have physical weight. But now your path takes a stranger turn. You follow a short, winding lane behind a row of stalls, where the buzz of bartering gives way to a quieter murmur, low voices, muted shuffling, and the occasional abrupt silence, as if a secret had just been tucked back into a basket. Ahead, near a half-collapsed brick wall overgrown with tulsi vines, you see a small clearing. There, beside a sleeping ox and a tilted cart, stands a man with a goat. Now, ordinarily, this would not strike you as remarkable. Goats are practically background noise in these parts, ambling through crowds, chewing everything from shawl hems to discarded beetle leaves. But this goat is odd. Its belly is large, not well-fed large, but suspiciously bulbous, like it had swallowed a melon whole. And the man with it, thin, nervous, glancing left and right, has the unmistakable air of someone doing something he hopes no one notices. Naturally, you stare. He notices. He hisses, "Eyes down, unless you want to explain it to the magistrate." You glance down, partly from obedience and partly to conceal your smile. What exactly are you about to witness? The man tugs gently on the goat's lead and coaxes it toward the cart. Then, with one swift motion, he lifts the hem of his tunic, reaches under the goat's belly, and unfastens a small pouch. From it, he produces two tightly wrapped bundles, thin linen tied with blue string. He tucks them into a hollow carved beneath a false floorboard of the cart, covers them with an old rug, then pats the goat gently, as if nothing has happened. You finally speak. "Smuggled spice?" He glares at you. "Saffron," he says under his breath. "Not smuggled, repositioned." Ah, of course. Saffron. The crimson thread of emperors and brides, medicines and lies. The costliest spice in the world even then, and as easy to hide as it was to desire. A little went a long way. A pinch could color a feast. A spoonful could pay a tax. A pouch could start a war or prevent one. Historians still argue about the volume of saffron trafficking during medieval times. Some claim it was rare enough to be tightly controlled by court officials and temple stewards. Others point to folk tales, to smuggler songs, and to suspiciously fat goats as proof that whole economies revolved around moving tiny threads across borders and markets with maximum discretion. You look again at the goat, who now appears entirely innocent, blinking slowly, chewing the air, blissfully unaware that its innards were until moments ago the most valuable hiding place in the district. You ask, "Why not carry it yourself?" He shrugs. People inspect hands, not hooves. He's not wrong. He pulls out a broken sandal and begins half-heartedly repairing it, using it as a cover for his presence in the alley. He mutters, "You didn't see me." You reply, smiling, "See who?" He grunts his approval, and you walk on. The idea of a goat smuggling saffron stays with you longer than you expect. It makes perfect sense, really. In a market where salt is measured in tiers and debts are settled with cardamom, why wouldn't the most precious spice in the world travel tucked against a warm belly? You return to the main thoroughfare, your eyes now sharper, scanning the animals with a new sense of suspicion. How many goats here are unwitting accomplices? How many pigeons? How many carts of onions with a little too much fragrance? And suddenly, the market feels like a play, and everyone's in on the script but you. As you pass another row of vendors, a group of children dart between stalls, laughing, their feet leaving chaotic trails in the dust. One girl wears a garland of marigolds around her neck and carries a stick with something shiny dangling from it. Perhaps a coin, or perhaps just tin made to look like silver. She waves it like a scepter and shouts something about the Queen of Spice before being tackled by a boy who insists she owes him 6 cloves and a scoop of jaggery.
The games of children echo the games of adults. Barter, bluff, exchange, escape. You stop at a shaded stall manned by a stooped old man with eyebrows like overgrown ferns. He sells nothing but small brass tins. Inside each, a whisper of spice. Not enough for cooking, barely enough for tea, but each one labeled carefully in graceful Devanagari script. You lift one. It's nearly empty. Sample tins, he explains. For selling? For hiding, he says, tapping the lid, when you don't want visitors to know what you really have. He opens another tin. Inside, saffron. Not a bundle, not even a spoonful. Just 3 fragile threads, curled like miniature flames resting on a square of silk. How much, you ask, already knowing you can't afford it. He names a number that translates roughly to half a harvest. You return the tin reverently. Why 3, you ask. 3 is enough, he replies. 1 for the tongue, 1 for the eye, 1 for the story. That last line lingers. You picture some lonely noble in a distant province dropping a single saffron thread into his rice and sighing deeply as the yellow spreads. Maybe it reminds him of his mother, maybe of his homeland, or maybe, like so many others in history, he's just using spice to make loneliness taste like something else. You thank the old man and step away. The crowd is thicker now. Voices overlap. The scent of smoke from the midday cooking fires mixes with cumin, salt, and dust. But still, in all this sensory chaos, the idea remains that spice moves not just in baskets and bags, but in hiding places, beneath floorboards, inside pouches, sewn into hems, tucked under fingernails, nestled in goats. This isn't just a market. It's a theater of misdirection, a dance of trust and trickery, a place where taste is traded in whispers. And as you walk, you realize you too are now part of its story.
The market, by now, has begun to pulse with full daytime vigor. The air feels thicker, not just from the rising heat, but from the collective presence of so many bodies, smells, and murmured negotiations layered over one another like silk upon silk. You pass beneath a canopy of woven cane that creaks lazily in the breeze, seeking shade as your eyes dart toward a cluster of traders gathered around something clearly worth whispering about. You edge closer, not pressing in, but orbiting at just the right angle to hear fragments. Traded for temple gold, they say. Swore it was pure nutmeg, but I smelled cinnamon. The Portuguese again, always stirring the pot. And just like that, you're in the middle of one of the market's favorite pastimes, spice lore. Rumors, half-truths, and anecdotes passed from vendor to vendor, generation to generation, usually prefaced with, "I heard from a cousin's neighbor's brother," and ending with disbelief or solemn nods of silent agreement. Today's tale seems to center around nutmeg. One man, a trader with fingernails dyed orange from saffron, leans against a pole and declares confidently, it was real nutmeg, straight from the islands. He brought 3 sacks, bartered all of it for gold rings from the temple treasury. A younger vendor scoffs, gold rings for nutmeg? Please, maybe in a dream. A third chimes in, shaking a stick at no one in particular. They say it cured the prince's migraines. The monks insisted on it after that. Historians still argue whether such trades ever occurred. Nutmeg was indeed worth a king's ransom during its peak, prized not just for its flavor, but for its supposed medicinal properties. Some chronicles hint that trades of land and jewels for tiny quantities of it. But most scholars believe the grander tales were inventions, propaganda even, used to justify price inflation or colonial interest. Still, the story of nutmeg for gold lingers like its scent, sweet, mysterious, and slightly unbelievable. You move on, passing a stall draped in velvet and smelling suspiciously decadent. Here, a merchant displays only nutmeg and mace, the outer lace-like covering of the nutmeg seed. His wares are arranged like jewelry, nestled in crushed red silk, and guarded by a monkey on a leash who glares at you with the weariness of someone who has seen too many browsers and not enough buyers. The merchant catches your eye. You look like someone who appreciates rarity. You nod cautiously, just admiring. He picks up a single nutmeg, perfectly round, polished until it gleams like a beetle, and holds it between his thumb and forefinger. This, he says, was carried across water by boatmen who never speak, wrapped in banana leaves, prayed over by 3 different grandmothers. You try not to laugh. He's serious. He hands it to you gently. Smell. You do. It's rich, spicy, almost floral. There's a heaviness to it, a depth you don't usually associate with a kitchen spice. It smells like the inside of an old book, like secrets steeped in oil and memory.
How much, you ask, even though you know you won't be buying? He leans in. For you? A story. You blink. A story? He nods. Tell me something I don't know. Something true. You hesitate, and then you tell him about the cinnamon coin, the woman who bartering with salted mango, the saffron smuggling goat. He listens, eyes sparkling, nodding slowly. Fair trade, he says, and he places the nutmeg in a tiny pouch, hands it to you with ceremony. You leave his stall lighter and heavier at once. Spice, it seems, can also be traded for narrative. Further down, you overhear 2 older men arguing over mace, not in terms of price, but purpose. Only for sweets, one insists. You ruin it with meat. Nonsense, the other growls. My daughter's wedding stew had mace. Everyone survived. The debate drifts after you like incense. You think again about the nutmeg myths, the tales that spices were worth their weight in gold, that sailors risked everything for a pouch, that temples once exchanged holy objects for a shipment of bark. Maybe it's not all myth. Or maybe, as with most things in this market, the truth is beside the point. What matters is the belief, the telling, the ritual of saying, this spice, this thing, is more than flavor. It's fate, it's medicine, it's power. A street performer nearby begins a slow dance with ankle bells, drawing a small crowd. She weaves through the onlookers with grace, occasionally tossing pinches of ground nutmeg into the air like shimmering dust. Children squeal and try to catch it on their tongues. A small boy runs past you holding a bowl, shouting, "For my uncle's joints! Nutmeg and mustard! Just need turmeric!" You smile. Everywhere, the story continues. And as you press the small pouch in your hand, filled with a single, perfect nutmeg, you feel oddly rich. Not in money, not in gold, but in something much more fragrant.
You walk on, pocketing the pouch with the nutmeg like it's a talisman. A tiny globe of spice, yes, but also a key. A reminder that stories and smells are traded with equal weight here. The market shifts around you, subtly tilting from the golden shimmer of morning toward the white blaze of midday. Vendors begin to loosen their turbans. Donkeys retreat into shadows. Children grow quieter, replaced by the lower murmur of adult negotiations. And now you hear a different sound. A soft, rustling hiss like dried leaves stirred by wind, broken occasionally by a rhythmic tap. You follow it toward a sunken courtyard just off the main path. It's partly hidden, framed by 2 slanted banyan trees whose roots have crawled lazily into the stonework over centuries. You duck beneath a tangle of vines and step inside. Here, the world seems to pause. It's quieter, cooler, shaded in half-light. Incense smoke curls in lazy spirals from a clay pot near the corner. In the center of the courtyard stands a man dressed in cream-colored robes with a purple sash knotted loosely at his waist. He's talking in low tones to a young assistant who holds a cloth ledger and a bag of coriander seeds. They're discussing taxes, specifically the elephant tax. At first, you think you misheard, but no, he repeats it. 2 sacks of coriander per tusk, more if the elephant is trained. You blink. Elephant tax? It turns out that in certain periods of medieval India, local inspectors working under princely courts or temple jurisdictions would tax trade caravans based on elephant ownership, not for the animals themselves, but for what they represented: wealth, mobility, and presumed profitability. And conveniently, elephants were hard to hide, especially the ones that walked into towns with decorated tusks and jingling bells. To pay the tax, traders didn't always use coin. Instead, they often offered spices: coriander, turmeric, even anise or fenugreek if times were lean. Not only were these lighter and easier to measure in uneven villages, they were also more desirable to inspectors, who used them for household needs or resold them discreetly. Historians still debate whether these taxes were standardized or completely arbitrary. Some evidence points to formal records, carved into temple walls or written on palm leaf scrolls. Other sources suggest it was more of a nudge-nudge system, less about civic order and more about keeping the inspectors well fed. You step closer to the conversation, trying to appear as if you belong. The young assistant is fidgeting. "But this caravan has only borrowed the elephant," he says, clearly trying to weasel out of payment. The inspector raises an eyebrow. "Borrowed?" "Yes," the boy insists. "The elephant is a cousin's. We're just transporting a spice shipment." The inspector doesn't budge. "The coriander doesn't know it's borrowed. It travels just the same." A clever line. You file it away for later. Eventually, the assistant gives in and hands over a smaller pouch than before. The inspector opens it, sniffs. His face twists. "Damp," he mutters. "You call this coriander?" The boy shrugs. "We had rain yesterday."
The inspector sighs. He waves them off with a half-hearted blessing, and the caravan, likely waiting somewhere nearby, will move on with slightly lighter bags. You linger in the courtyard a bit longer. A man near the stone wall is measuring cumin seeds on a brass scale. Not for cooking, for payroll. You hear him muttering names: drivers, carriers, loaders. Each owed a certain number of spoonfuls for the morning's work. It makes you wonder, how many people in this world were paid not in coin, not in paper, but in taste? A week's worth of fennel for a delivery, half a sack of chili powder for fixing a wheel, a handful of curry leaf for a good story told well at the fire. Nearby, another man crouches beside a ledger. He dips a reed into ink and writes carefully. The book, you realize, is filled not with numbers, but with weights, spice quantities noted in pinches, handfuls, and ladlefuls. The script is beautiful, looped and spiraled, with the kind of care people usually reserve for holy texts. You catch a glimpse. 3 palm scoops coriander to Gopal. Late again. Half a ladle turmeric to Kamala. Full pinch of asafoetida pending. This is not just bookkeeping. It's a language of labor. And in this world where flavors are currency, your wages might stain your hands yellow, sting your nose red, or perfume your pocket sweet. You move to a bench beneath one of the banyan trees, letting the shade cool your forehead. From here, the courtyard feels timeless, an island in the market, a kind of administrative sanctum where bureaucracy and botany have blended into something strangely poetic. A low voice beside you interrupts your thoughts. You hear about the coriander bribe? You turn. A man in a faded tunic leans against the tree with a grin. "Which one?" you ask. Already amused. He chuckles. "Last season, a tax official at the southern gate refused to let a merchant through, claimed the elephant was too noisy." You raise an eyebrow. "Noisy?"
Apparently it disrupted the prayer chants. So what happened? The merchant returned with a bag of coriander soaked in rosewater, quieted everyone's mood, even the elephant. He laughs, a warm sound, and tosses you a seed. Chew that. Helps digestion. You do. The burst of citrus and spice surprises you. A seed so small, yet filled with flavor. And that's the thing about coriander. It's often overlooked in favor of its louder cousins, but it has its place, its power. Enough to pay a toll, enough to end an argument, enough to shift a day's fate. You leave the courtyard soon after, quietly, carrying the taste of coriander on your tongue and the image of that cumin payroll in your mind. It's midday now, truly. The sun blazes overhead, and the noise of the market returns in full force. But somehow, after that quiet, orderly courtyard of whisper trade and fragrant taxes, the world outside feels a bit more chaotic, a bit more alive, and a bit more absurd, in the best way.
As you step back into the main artery of the spice market, the heat presses down like a second skin. Everything seems to shimmer. Stall awnings fluttering in waves of warm air, the brass scales gleaming brighter than before, and the cobbled ground giving off that dry, toasted stone scent. But it's not just heat that thickens the atmosphere now. It's the unmistakable, almost mystical aroma of cardamom. You follow it like a trail. Down a crooked passage between two buildings, walls streaked with turmeric stains and charcoal handprints, you find a stall unlike any you've seen. It's quiet. No shouting, no bargaining, no loud performances. Just a single vendor seated cross-legged behind a low table made from weathered neem wood. His head is wrapped in pale cloth, and his posture resembles that of a monk at prayer. His hands rest lightly on his knees, and before him, arranged with mathematical precision, are 6 carved wooden bowls, each one containing a different shade and form of cardamom. You step closer, compelled by curiosity more than intent. He opens his eyes. "Choose one," he says, his voice soft but firm. You glance at the bowls. One holds the familiar green pods, fat, fresh, fragrant. Another contains blackened dried pods, split open to reveal sticky black seeds. The third is filled with pale brown powder. The fourth with small broken husks. The fifth is empty save for a single cracked pod resting in the center, lonely and sharp-smelling. And the last, perhaps most curious, holds what looks like crushed ash mixed with spice dust and slivers of bark. "Each bowl tells a story," he says. You point to the powder. "Ground too soon," he murmurs. "Still powerful, but impatient. Good for tea, bad for contracts." You try not to laugh. He's serious. You point to the empty bowl with the lone cracked pod. "Regret," he says. "That which cannot be restored. Bitterness with no sweetness to balance it." Then your gaze lingers on the final bowl, the strange mix of ash and spice and dark flakes. He sees this and nods slowly. "That is the curse bowl." You blink. "Sorry, curse?" He doesn't change tone. "Long ago, in a village far from here, monks carved a set of bowls to store the strongest spices, cardamom, clove, even shavings of star anise. But one bowl was made from a tree struck by lightning. Anything stored in it, no matter how sweet, turned bitter." You peer closer. The bowl itself is cracked in places, the wood blackened and dry, but its contents are not moldy or spoiled, just wrong, like the smell of memories left too long in the sun. "Why keep it?" you ask. "Because not all spice is for food. Some is for reminding."
He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. Historians still debate whether such stories are mere folklore or coded truths. Were these cursed bowls symbolic reminders about the fragility of trade, the risk of greed? Or were they simply warnings passed down to prevent careless storage? Either way, the myth remains.
You sit down opposite the man, the table between you. He offers a small cup of water infused with cardamom and clove. It's warm, faintly sweet, deeply aromatic. The kind of drink that doesn't rush to impress you, but lingers, like a memory of someone who once said something very wise, then disappeared. You sip, you exhale. Cardamom holds secrets, he says, finally breaking the silence. You nod. You're beginning to believe that every spice here does. He tells you of deals made with cardamom pods placed carefully in the center of ledgers, of lovers who left them in each other's pockets as tokens of apology, of a certain governor who tested his new chefs by having them identify fake cardamom, because, yes, there is fake cardamom made from dyed pod husks and scented oils designed to fool the lazy or the desperate. Smell alone won't save you, he warns. You must feel it. The weight, the texture, the truth is in the skin. He hands you a pod. It's slightly rough, oval, striped with faint ridges. You crack it open, slowly. Inside are tiny black seeds, nestled like secrets in a dusty library. You roll one between your fingers. It leaves no stain, but it leaves something else. A faint tingle in the skin, an invisible warmth. This one's real, he says, pleased. You have a good hand. You feel oddly proud. From a nearby stall, you hear a woman selling cardamom-scented oil for temple lamps. Another vendor is roasting nuts with powdered cardamom and jaggery, the smell thick and clinging. In the air, all around you, cardamom seems to rise like fog, pervasive, invisible, divine. The man before you sighs. Of all the spices, he says, cardamom is the one that never shouts, but people always return to it. You think about that. About all the spices you've encountered so far. Ginger, saffron, cumin, chili. All bold, all dramatic. But cardamom is different, quieter, more personal. A spice of reflection, not display. He begins sorting the pods again, separating them by size, color, even mood, it seems. You leave him to his work, nodding quietly, and walk back out into the fuller heat of the street. You now notice cardamom everywhere. A merchant wraps his silverware in cardamom-scented cloth. A woman tosses a handful into boiling tea as her customers wait in patient reverence. A small child chews on a pod like candy, eyes closed, swaying slightly, as if listening to music only he can hear. And you, well, you've been changed by it too. Not in some grand, poetic way, but in the subtle, satisfying sense that you understand something now. That, in a world of shouting spices, it's the quiet ones that linger longest. And somewhere in your pouch, next to the cinnamon coin and the ginger slab and the sacred nutmeg, you tuck a single green pod. Just to remember. As you leave behind the gentle gravity of the cardamom stall, your footsteps find rhythm once more among the hum of the market. The scent of that tiny green pod clings to your hands like a blessing, or perhaps like a clever goodbye. But your senses quickly catch hold of something new now, something thick and comforting. The smell of cooked lentils, ghee, and toasted spice drifting from a nearby langar tent. The langar, an open communal kitchen usually run by a temple or local guild, sits at the far end of the spice market, beneath a canvas canopy stretched between 4 wooden poles. Here, the noise softens. Laughter replaces haggling. The sharp edges of business give way to something rounder, warmer.
generosity. A boy, no older than 12, stands barefoot in front of a large cauldron bubbling over a wood fire stove. He stirs slowly with a long silver ladle carved in the shape of a chili pepper. Every few rotations, he stops to taste the broth, not with a spoon, but by lifting a few droplets to the back of his hand, the way generations before him did. He sees you, offers a nod, then gestures with the ladle, inviting you closer. You approach. The aroma intensifies. Lentils thick with cumin and asafoetida, garlic browned just so, a whisper of fenugreek. Behind him, others ladle food into leaf bowls, handing them to people seated cross-legged in orderly rows. Merchants, travelers, mothers, children, and more than a few familiar faces from the stalls you visited earlier. You take your place in line. When your turn comes, the boy hands you a bowl with practiced grace. No words. Just a look that says, "This is for everyone. No need to explain yourself." You sit on the ground beneath the tent's shadow, bowl in hand. The food is hot, simple, rich, somehow more satisfying than anything money could buy. You take a slow bite. The flavors unfold. Yellow lentils made fragrant with mustard seed. Curry leaves singing softly in the ghee, a distant hint of clove. And the rice, fluffy, slightly sticky, tinted faintly orange by turmeric. You chew slowly, breathing in the warm steam. Around you, others do the same. No one rushes, because here, in the langar, time stretches. The market outside may tick with urgency, but inside this tent, meals are not mere sustenance. They're rituals, acts of kindness dressed in cumin and salt. You look again at the boy with the chili pepper ladle. He's stirring with the same hypnotic patience as before. Each motion is slow, circular, unbothered. His wrist turns like a wheel. His eyes half close, as if remembering something far away. An older man beside you leans over and whispers, "That ladle's been here for 30 years. You blink. The boy? He laughs. No, the ladle. The boy's new. The ladle's family.
You glance back. Indeed, the ladle does seem older than the boy using it. Its edges are darkened from years of fire, and its shape, though once precise, is now softened by decades of movement through lentils and rice. The chili, the old man adds, was carved by the founder's cousin, symbol of heat, symbol of unity. Even in soup, a little spice brings people together. You nod, letting the idea simmer. The ladle moves. The fire crackles. People eat quietly. In many parts of medieval India, langars like this were not just about food, they were equalizers. Anyone could sit, from a wealthy silk trader to a wandering monk. No one asked who you were. Your hunger was proof enough of your place. Historians still marvel at the langar's role in fostering social cohesion, not just as charity, but as philosophy. The idea that spice, food, and time could erase lines drawn by caste or coin. You finish your meal, licking the last bit of dal from your fingers. It tastes like cumin, but also like something more elusive, belonging. A volunteer collects your leaf bowl. Another hands you a cup of warm, spiced buttermilk, tangy with ground cumin and cooled with a leaf of mint. You sip it slowly, the sharpness cleansing your tongue, the chill washing away the midday sun. As you prepare to leave, the boy catches your eye once more. He holds the ladle aloft, pointing it toward the ceiling of the canopy. You follow his gaze. There, etched into the central pole of the canopy, are names. Hundreds of them, scratched lightly, barely visible unless the light hits just right. Names in Hindi, Sanskrit, Tamil, Persian, and scripts you can't identify. Some are simple, others elaborate. A few are dates, a couple are symbols, but all share one thing in common. They're written just above head height, as if by people who stood to serve. you feel a sudden urge to add your own. Not an ego, but an acknowledgement. You step forward, borrow a tiny shard of charcoal, and mark a tiny spice pod shape, a personal symbol, perhaps, of your walk through this strange, sacred place. No one stops you, because here, everyone contributes something, whether a ladleful, a name, a recipe, or a moment of stillness beneath the canvas. As you step out of the tent, back into the bright riot of the market, your belly full and your hands warm, you realize something quietly profound. This meal, this spoonful of lentils, this shard of firewood, this ladle with its carved chili curve is history too. Not written in stone, but cooked, shared, and remembered. You walk slowly, the taste of cumin lingering, and for the first time all day, you do not smell cardamom, or saffron, or pepper. You smell comfort, and sometimes that's the rarest spice of all.
Your stomach is full, your limbs just the right amount of heavy, and yet the market still tugs at you. Whispers you haven't heard, corners you haven't seen, secrets still steaming beneath baskets and ledgers. You wander back toward the quieter lanes where the smell of ghee fades and something drier, dustier takes its place. Ink, parchment, and sun-warmed banana leaves. At the edge of a shaded alcove, nestled between two faded spice stalls, sits an elderly scribe, hunched like a hook over a low desk. His robes are the color of faded turmeric. His beard looks as though it's been seasoned with flour. Around him are bundles of leaves, not for wrapping food, but for recording math. Specifically, spice math. On a wide banana leaf stretched taut over a wooden board, he draws figures using a twig dipped in lamp-black ink. His hand moves slowly, methodically, pausing after every line as if the numbers themselves might need a moment to breathe. You step closer, curious. What's he calculating? You whisper to a boy sitting nearby, chewing on a sugarcane stalk. Cumin to gold ratio, he mumbles between bites. You blink. The scribe does not look up, but he must have heard. It fluctuates, he says quietly, depending on region, weather, and festival proximity. Ah, of course. You kneel to get a better look. He's charted a series of exchanges, cumin sacks to copper coins, to silver slivers, to gold leaf. Tiny illustrations of each spice flank the numbers. Cumin drawn like tiny crescent moons, fennel like stars, coriander a tiny spiral. The system is both complex and beautiful. You keep these records for traders, you ask? No, he says, for the princes. He reaches beneath the desk and pulls out a narrow scroll. It's old, creased, browned at the edges, scented faintly of clove and dust. The calligraphy is exquisite. Every digit, every symbol, a tiny work of art. Each prince keeps his own spice portfolio, he says. Their fortunes rise and fall not just on grain or silk, but on the yield of cumin in the northern provinces. You're about to ask if he's joking, but the glint in his eye tells you he's absolutely not. Historians still argue about the extent of spice as a strategic asset in medieval Indian courts. While it's clear that spices were central to trade and health, the idea that nobles kept detailed spice accounts, complete with ledgers and trend lines, sounds almost too modern to be true. And yet, records have been found. Faded, coded, often metaphorical, but unmistakably economic.
The Prince of Dholpur once lost a bride over bad cumin math, the scribe mutters, mostly to himself. You wait, hoping for elaboration. He promised her family a year's supply, the scribe explains, based on dry season pricing. Didn't account for monsoon inflation. By the time the wedding came, the cost had doubled.
And? The bride married a salt merchant. He nods solemnly. You try not to laugh. The boy with the sugarcane lets out a snort. The scribe ignores him and returns to his work, adjusting the slope of a banana leaf with care. Behind him, bundles of leaf books are tied with dyed thread. Some have small spice pods tucked inside, page markers, or perhaps scent memory aids. He gestures to one. Star Anise Records, he says. Very volatile market. You scan the entries. A few are scratched out. Others have side notes, little recipes or warnings. Too strong for infants. Or causes dreams of rivers. You wonder how many of these records are numbers and how many are poetry disguised as accounting. It's a fine line here. The scribe picks up another leaf. This one tracks trade against the lunar cycle. You lean in. Sure enough, there's a sequence of moons drawn across the top, each linked to a bundle of clove prices. Full moons, it seems, brought high demand. New moons, better deals. Why? You ask. Weddings. Auspicious dates. People buy more spice when the moon is fat. It's oddly logical. He hands you a blank banana leaf and a short reed. Try, he says. You hesitate, then crouch beside him, dabbing the reed into the lampblack. The ink is slow. It resists the leaf's fibers. You draw a clumsy cumin symbol, then attempt a single digit. It bleeds at the edges, but it stands. Acceptable, the scribe says, which from him feels like a parade of praise. He pats the leaf dry with a cloth, dusted in turmeric powder, an old trick, he explains, to set the ink. You hand it back. He rolls it gently, tucks it into a cloth pouch, and hands it to you. Keep it. Everyone should know their own cumin worth. You bow slightly. It feels right. As you walk away, you glance back once. The scribe is already writing again. The boy is now asleep, the sugarcane stalk fallen beside him. The air smells like dry paper, ink, and faint nutmeg. You slip the leaf pouch into your satchel. Between the cinnamon coin, the ginger slab, the lone nutmeg, and the cardamom pod, it fits perfectly. A new voice in your growing collection of fragrant relics. The world outside the scribe's alcove feels faster now, louder. But in your hands, you carry something quiet. A number, a spice, a bit of your own clumsy handwriting. And that, too, is history.
You emerge from the cool shadows of the spice accountant's alcove and step back into the burnished midday swirl of the market. The sun has now risen high above the tiled rooftops, and the spice-scented dust shimmers like golden fog, kicked up by sandals, hooves, and the occasional dancing child. The rhythm of commerce continues, louder now, layered with a kind of steady, practiced energy that only experience can summon. But in the midst of this hustle, amid the bells on bullock carts and the cries of vendors haggling over sacks of asafoetida, you hear something different, something more intimate, less transactional. A sound not quite musical, but certainly melodic. Voices, low, rhythmic, leaning in close. You follow the sound through a narrow lane curtained by strips of fabric dyed in indigo and brick red. The path twists, then opens into a shaded nook beneath a giant tamarind tree. Its branches spread out like an umbrella of stories. Beneath it, seated in a tight semicircle, are 6 merchants sharing not goods, but gossip. Of course they are. You take a seat near the edge, trying to appear invisible. They pay you little mind. Their attention is on the one in the center, a wiry man with sharp eyes and fingers that keep rolling a clove back and forth across the palm of his hand like a talisman. You all heard what happened with the vizier's shipment, yes? He begins. A few nods. He leans in, dramatically lowering his voice. Spoiled. Entire load.
20 sacks of saffron, rotted to the root, mowed like green velvet. Gasps. One of the women claps a hand to her mouth. No. Yes, and guess who packed them? A collective inhale. His new brother-in-law. Amateur, someone mutters. Ambitious fool, adds another. You listen closely. This isn't just idle talk. It's the market's nervous system, the unofficial bulletin board where reputations rise and fall faster than the cumin to gold ratio. Here, under the tamarind shade, no ledger is needed. These are the oral records, the warnings, the grudges and triumphs passed in whispers and laughter. One woman, broad-shouldered, eyes like sharp black seeds, speaks up next. And you know his plan, yes? To ship rosewater in copper flasks. Copper, of all things. The acidity alone. She waves a hand as if the thought itself stings. Another shakes his head. You think these noble types would learn? Spice doesn't care for titles. Nor for fools, someone adds dryly. They laugh. A shared, knowing sound.
Historians still struggle to capture this layer of trade, the unwritten ecosystem of rumor and reputation. Official records mention weights, ports, taxes. But this is the soul of the market, a system of memory and judgment enforced not by courts, but by conversation. One man begins passing around a small cloth pouch. Each person takes a clove from it, rolls it between their fingers and mutters something, either a name or a brief judgment or a vague proverb. What are you doing? You ask, finally daring to speak. Clove reckoning, says the wiry man. Every week, the woman explains, we pass judgment on the week's deals. If your clove cracks when you press it, your deal has flaws. You blink. And if it doesn't, then you spoke true, measured fair, and didn't water your turmeric. A simple ritual, and yet entirely binding in this circle. You're offered a clove. You take it. It's warm, faintly sticky. You squeeze gently. It cracks. A few raise eyebrows. Newcomer, the woman says kindly, still learning. You nod, smiling. There's no shame in it, just an invitation to do better. The gossip moves on. Stories of a pepper merchant caught diluting his powder with crushed tamarind seed, a young trader who forgot to bless his cumin before a wedding feast. Disaster ensued. And a particularly animated tale about a parrot who exposed the bribe by repeating his master's whispered threats. You wish that one were true. Then again, here, truth isn't always the point. These stories, factual or fantastical, function as social spices themselves. They add flavor to memory, heat to warning, sweetness to shared history. They preserve more than goods. They preserve accountability. Eventually, the closed circle begins to disperse. Some return to stalls. Others wander off toward the temple path. You stay a moment longer, watching the tamarind pods sway gently overhead. The shade here feels dense with words, as if the tree has soaked up centuries of scandal and laughter. Before you leave, the sharp-eyed man presses a fresh clove into your hand. Don't keep it too long, he warns. Like truth, it loses its oil. You thank him and tuck it away. Back in the sunlit paths of the market, the tone feels different now. Not heavier, but sharper. Every vendor, every stall, every sack of spice is not just a product, but a promise. And everyone is watching. You pass a pepper seller who nods politely, though his eyes flick briefly to your hands, perhaps to check for turmeric stains, perhaps to assess the freshness of your clove. You walk on, more aware of the subtle glances now, the small cues of reputation, trust, and memory and motion. No one shouts it, but you know, your choices linger here, like fragrance, like rumor, like cardamom in the hem of a shawl. And somewhere behind you, under that tree, the stories continue. Because in this market, gossip isn't just talk, it's currency.
You continue walking, your pace steady now, your senses fine-tuned like a well-used pestle. Every scent that drifts past, coriander, burnt jaggery, a hint of lime leaf, tells a story you're learning to read. But then, just as you begin to feel at ease in this rhythm of spice and story, a new sound breaks through. Not a voice, not a chant, but a distant jingling, metal on leather, rhythmically spaced. At first, you think it's another donkey or bullock cart rattling along, but this sound is cleaner, sharper, deliberate. You follow it around the bend of a brick alley, past a woman stirring tamarind chutney with one hand and scolding a chicken with the other, until you reach an open lane lined with stalls selling nothing but bundles of rope, dyed fabric, and clay pots. And there, emerging from the far end, cloaked in dust and sunlight, comes a small caravan of camels, their hooves silent on the sand, but their gear loaded with bells that chime as they walk. Each camel carries bundles wrapped in cloth, tied tightly and stamped with spice symbols: clove, cumin, cassia, black mustard seed. But these are not ordinary traders. These are clove runners. And the bells are not decorative. They are a warning. A nearby vendor mutters, "They came through the sandalwood route." That sound? That's not for show. It keeps thieves and rats away. You watch as the lead camel, tall, yellow-toothed, blinking slowly, lumbers to a halt beside a shaded stall. A man in a red turban dismounts and unties a package with the care of someone defusing a bomb. He opens the cloth, and the scent hits you before you even see the contents. Cloves. Thick, dark, whole, the kind that look like tiny wooden nails but carry a fire in their heart. "Straight from the southern port," he says, wiping his brow. Another vendor leans in to inspect. "Any mold?" "Not one," he replies proudly. "Buried them in salt and mustard husks for the journey. Kept dry the whole way." You listen carefully. Salt and mustard husks, the smuggler's insulation of choice. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or anecdotal. Was clove really so valuable that entire caravans risked theft, bribery, and rot just to carry them inland? Or were these stories inflated, exaggerated for effect, passed down by proud traders whose clove bundles carried more myth than spice? But here and now, you can smell the truth.
The cloves are fresh, the kind that bites your tongue if you chew them whole, the kind that last for years and still make a pot of rice taste like something worth singing about. A boy arrives with a brass bowl filled with clean water. The lead trader washes his hands carefully, then offers samples. 2 cloves per merchant, 1 to taste, 1 to carry. That's the custom. You're handed one too. You roll it between your fingers. It's heavier than you would expect, oily, sharp-edged. You sniff it. It smells like firewood and medicine and the inside of a wedding chest. You hesitate, then tuck it into your pouch. You're building a collection of history after all, and this one is a fragment of flame. The camel bells jingle again. The caravan moves on, and just as quickly as they came, they vanish into the dust, leaving behind nothing but the scent and a few whispers. "That's the last shipment for the season," someone murmurs. "Any late ones will mold in the pass." You feel the quiet shift among the traders, the way their eyes follow the disappearing hum of bells. There's relief, yes, but also tension, because clove caravans stop, clove prices climb. A small cluster of vendors gather near the spot the camels vacated. One pulls out a scrap of cloth, a spice tracker, and begins adjusting lines of charcoal marks. Another pulls a leather-bound notebook and updates his debts. A third simply mutters, "Clove shortage coming. Watch the weddings." You turn. "Weddings?" He nods. "Cloves are for vows, chewed during ceremonies, sent in gift bundles. If they're scarce, dowries shift." You stare. Cloves influencing marriage negotiations? Apparently yes. In some regions, cloves weren't just used to flavor feasts. They symbolized heat, preservation, longevity.
Chewing one during your vows was believed to preserve the truth of your words. Fewer cloves, less faith in the promise. You wonder how many relationships over the centuries were affected by nothing more than a late clove delivery. Another merchant walks by, muttering curses under his breath. He carries a small sack, clearly spoiled. A few traders sniff and recoil. Mold, someone confirms. Must have passed through the marsh route. And just like that, a trader's entire reputation shifts, all because his cloves didn't sing, because they carried silence instead of scent. You step back from the group and lean against the trunk of a neem tree, processing it all. The bells still echo faintly in your ears. The clove still rests in your palm, tiny and dark and pointed like a miniature spear. You look at it and realize this is not just a spice. It is a witness to every promise, every lie, every long journey and quiet theft. It's been hidden in goat bellies, buried in salt, and passed between lovers as a secret signal. It sparked gossip, provoked poetry, and raised the price of marriage by the handful. And now, it rests in your hand. A relic, a memory. You finally press it into your pouch, alongside the others, the ginger slab, the cinnamon coin, the cardamom pod, the cumin leaf scroll. You don't need to label them. You remember every story. And as the sun begins to lower its glare, casting the market in gold again, you realize that this isn't just the bazaar. It's a spice map of human ambition, desire, and very specific wedding superstitions. And you've become one of its wandering, spice-scented footnotes.
The late afternoon sun has begun to slide across the sky, trading heat for shadow, but the market has not yet slowed. If anything, it has simply changed mood. The hurried exchanges of the morning, of debt paid in pepper and gossip shared in cloves, have now given way to something more ceremonial, more deliberate. You sense it in the way the vendors begin to straighten their displays, and how customers walk less like hunters and more like connoisseurs. You wander into a lane you hadn't noticed before. Its walls are hung not with baskets or bolts of cloth, but with strips of dyed muslin gently swaying in the breeze. Gold threads glint along the edges. The smell here is sharp and fragrant, like turmeric mixed with something metallic, something worn close to the skin. This is not a spice alley. It is a jewelry path, but not the kind filled with precious stones. Here, the ornaments are modest. Bangles made of copper and dyed bone, earrings set with glass beads, and above all, nose rings, hundreds of them, displayed on twisted cords and pinned to strings like sun catchers. Each one has a distinct scent. That's what stops you. You lean closer. These aren't ordinary ornaments. Each ring, each stud, each bangle has been perfumed with spices, an old tradition, one that fused adornment with identity. A woman seated behind the nearest display nods at your interest. Her hands are stained the golden hue of turmeric, and her wrists jingle softly when she shifts. "Looking for a memory?" she asks. You raise an eyebrow. She smiles. "Jewelry holds spice longer than skin." You step closer. She lifts a tray filled with tiny nose rings, each nestled in cloth and marked with a tiny symbol. You pick one up. It smells faintly of black pepper and sandalwood. That one, she says, is for strength, worn by widows who manage trade routes. You try another, clove and rose. For brides, so the mouth says what the heart hides. And another, sharp cumin with a thread of lime. That one's for warrior sisters, women who wait. Each piece is a blend of aesthetic and intention, jewelry not just for show, but for signaling, for scenting the body in ways that sent messages through air, instead of paper. Historians still study these traditions with puzzlement. Were these perfumes meant for seduction, for status, for ritual? Some argue the perfumes were practical, masks for sweat in crowded markets. Others believe they were codes, spices worn like secret languages, layered in gold and copper and cloth. You're beginning to suspect it was both. You glance at the woman. Do you wear one? You ask. She taps her own nose ring, delicate, silver, tinged at the tip with orange. Coriander and turmeric, she says. For balance. I run this stall after all. You smile. She lifts a bangle and holds it to your wrist. It's wood, lacquered and wrapped with thread that still holds the scent of cinnamon. This, she says, is for travelers, to help them remember where they've been. You hesitate, but she's already tying it gently, the thread warm from her hands. Gift, she says. You want to protest, but something in her expression quiets you.
It will smell faintly of you soon, she adds. Spice does that. It listens. You look down at the bangle. The scent is subtle now. Wood, cinnamon, a whisper of old journeys. It feels right. You thank her, bow slightly, and continue on. The jewelry path leads you to another stall, this one surrounded by shallow bowls filled with powders, not for cooking, not even for selling. These are dyes, spice-based pigments used for clothing, paint, and ritual. A man squats in the center, grinding dried turmeric into a paste with a pestle the size of your arm. He works in silence, but his hands are fast, practiced, confident. The paste he's making is vivid, electric yellow, so bright it seems to pulse. A group of women nearby dip long strips of cotton into vats of similar colors. Red from chili and beetroot, indigo from fermented leaves, orange from dried marigold petals and saffron. Each piece is laid across rope lines strung between poles, the cloth dripping like giant tongues tasting the air. You step closer. Do the colors last? You ask. A young woman turns to you, grinning. Longer than most promises? You laugh. She continues dipping. We dye for the temple, for festivals, for bride gifts. The spice pays for spice, but the spice also paints the world. You look at the cloth. The breeze lifts it gently, sending its scent toward you. Turmeric and ash, flower and fire. You reach out. The fabric is warm, soft, humming with scent. Turmeric for protection, indigo for humility, red for power. You think of the women earlier, the ones selling cardamom and black pepper from shawls stained yellow with age. Perhaps those were not just cooking stains. Perhaps they were statements. Nearby, an older woman sews narrow strands of dyed cloth into small packets. Scent sachets for placing in garments, hanging above beds, tucking into trunks of wedding gifts. Each is labeled with a symbol. Love, wealth, rain, safe birth, no quarrels. You lift one. It smells of mace and dried basil. Which is this? She takes it, sniffs briefly, then nods. For patience, she says. Usually gifted to mothers-in-law. You laugh again. So does she. It seems even spices need diplomacy sometimes. You purchase a sachet, one marked with the symbol of a rising moon. She presses it into your hand with a wink. She says, "For calm sleep." Your pouch is growing full, but your heart feels lighter. You walk on through the cloth-lined lanes, the jewelry scents fading behind you, replaced by the duskier tones of dried petals and chilly dust. But you carry their stories with you now, on your wrist, in your pouch, in the fabric of your tunic that now carries a whisper of clove and color. And once again, the market has surprised you. Because spice isn't just swallowed or stirred. Sometimes it's worn. Sometimes it's whispered. Sometimes it's stitched into the edge of a bangle, or tucked behind the curve of a bride's nose ring. And in those moments, quiet, fragrant, unseen, spice becomes something even more powerful than trade. It becomes identity.
By now, the light has mellowed into a thick golden syrup. Shadows stretch like silk along the cobbled pathways, and the once clamorous market begins to settle into a slower rhythm. Fewer sales, longer conversations, and the faint sound of prayers drifting from nearby courtyards. You find yourself meandering past familiar stalls, now emptied of morning's urgency. The air has changed too. Not just cooler, but sweeter. And that's when you see them. Pyramids of jaggery. Small towers of amber and brown, stacked on wide, flat trays like miniature temples glowing in the slanting sun. Each piece is shaped by hand, irregular, charmingly cracked, some wrapped in palm leaves, others exposed to the warm air, shining slightly with melted sugar. You approach the stall. A pair of young boys are crouched behind it, one carefully brushing flies away with a frond, the other watching over a pot of thick syrup reducing over low coals. The scent is intoxicating, smoky, sweet, deep with molasses and just a hint of ginger root. The elder boy notices you. "Want to try?" he asks, holding out a shard. You nod, accepting the rough triangle of jaggery. It's warm in your hand, sticky. You bite into it and immediately feel the grainy sweetness break apart, sending a deep richness across your tongue. A flavor so old and comforting it feels like it predates fire. "Best eaten before sunset," the boy says. "Sweeter that way." You believe him without question. Jaggery in these parts is more than a sweetener. It's currency, medicine, offering, and treat all in one. Made from boiled sugarcane or palm sap, cooled in molds and hardened in open air, it's been used to pay debts, to bless harvests, to bribe children, and to barter for black pepper by the scoop. "Want to see something else?" the younger boy asks, already standing. You nod, because in this market, that question always leads somewhere worth following. He leads you behind the stall, past a curtain of cloth sacks, and into a shaded clearing where rows of jaggery are cooling in pyramidal molds. But something's different here. These pieces aren't just food. They've been carved. Each block bears a symbol pressed into the surface before the sugar set. A lotus, a fish, a pair of hands, a sun, a swirl. The boy crouches beside one, carefully lifting it to show you the underside. On it, a merchant's mark. You stare. You stamp your jaggery? He grins. Of course, it's ours. How else will people know?
You run your fingers along the design. The heat from the sugar still lingers in the grooves, a soft, slightly sticky warmth, like holding a memory that refuses to cool. Historians still debate the prevalence of spice-branded sweets, whether they served a commercial, ceremonial, or even magical purpose. Some records suggest these symbols represented origin or purity, used to prove a sweet had been made from unadulterated cane and not mixed with chalk or flour. Others believed the symbols were blessings, pressed into food like prayers onto parchment. Either way, they endure. The boy shows you another. This one is shaped like a tiny mountain, and the stamp is of an elephant with a swirling trunk. That's for weddings, he says. Groom's side gives it to bride's family. It means strength and sweetness. You lift it gently. It smells slightly different. Ginger, clove, and something floral. Maybe rose? We add different spices for different meanings, he explains. Not everyone knows, but old people remember. You ask if they sell many of these. Not really. They're more for festivals, for sending messages. You eat them last, after the feast, to close the mouth with something good. You look again at the rows of cooling jaggery, each block slowly hardening into its final form. Each one is a sentence, a statement, a flavor encoded with emotion. And here you are, in a courtyard of edible communication. The older boy returns with a bowl of roasted sesame seeds. For dusting, he says. Keeps flies off, adds crunch. He sprinkles a handful onto the pyramid closest to you. The seeds cling to the warm sugar like stories to eager listeners. You glance toward the edge of the clearing. A low shelf holds dozens of small jaggery bundles, wrapped in dried leaves and tied with red thread. You ask what they're for. Gifts, he replies. For teachers, neighbors, temple staff, or people who make your day better. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It's what my grandfather said. You purchase one, small, tied neatly, stamped with the sun symbol. The boy nods approvingly and whispers, "That one's good for remembering." As you step back into the main path, the jaggery bundle tucked carefully in your pouch, you feel the weight of it. Not heavy, but anchoring. Like a stone of sweetness meant to balance you amid all the fire of cumin and vinegar of tamarind. You pass other stalls now preparing for evening. A woman fans her spice baskets with folded banana leaves, chasing out the day's heat. A dog lies beside a sack of chili powder, perfectly unfazed. The sun rests low on the rooftops, casting the world in long shadows and the soft promise of sleep. But before you go, you pause near a stall where saffron is being weighed on a tiny scale, no larger than your palm. A man carefully adds the strands, one at a time. You smile. You think of goats and gold and whispers under tamarind trees, and now of pyramids of sugar, stamped with prayers. You reach into your pouch, run your fingers over the bundle, and decide you'll wait until nightfall to open it. Because sweetness, after all, should have its own ceremony.
The sun has now dipped low enough that it kisses only the tallest rooftops and the tips of the temple towers. The market begins to exhale. Stall owners stack their baskets. Carts creak with slow retreat. The air, still fragrant, grows less aggressive, no longer layered in fire and fruit, but softened now into earth and ember. You follow a path you hadn't seen before. Narrow, paved with loose stones, it winds past shuttered stalls and flickering oil lamps. Somewhere far off, a flute begins to play, a melody so slow and unhurried
that it feels like time itself is stretching to listen. And then you hear something sharper. Voices. Not angry, not loud, but competitive, sharp and measured. You turn a corner and find a clearing, a small stone square at the edge of the market. There, under the glow of a lantern hung from a bent iron pole, two men face each other in the center of a modest circle. In their hands, ginger roots. You blink, then watch. They stand with legs apart, arms cocked, and without warning, one of them hurls his ginger at the ground near his opponent's feet. The root bounces, twists in the dust, and lands neatly. The crowd murmurs. The other man picks up a slightly gnarled ginger, eyes it critically, and tosses it like a challenge coin. It arcs high, spins, lands with a thud, rolls twice, stops. Closer. Cheers erupt. Someone shouts, "Point!" You've just stumbled upon a midnight ginger duel, one of the oldest, strangest market traditions passed down among spice sellers. Less a game of strength, more one of precision and pride. Each player brings 5 roots, carefully selected for shape, weight, and bounce. The rules? Simple. Hit a target. Come closer than your opponent. Break their root? Instant win. You step closer. Someone hands you a cup of sweetened tamarind juice. Another gestures for you to sit on a low crate. You obey, eyes fixed on the players now circling each other like cats. Best of 5, someone explains. No spice mixing, no oil coating, pure ginger. You nod solemnly. This is not sport. It is ritual. The third round begins. One player lifts a particularly knotted root. He kisses it for luck, spins it twice in his palm, and lets it fly. It hits the target squarely. A puff of dust rises. Cheers again. The second player responds with a root long and straight. It slices through the air like a dart. Hits even closer. Gasps. Applause.
They reset. You learn that these matches aren't about prizes, no gold, no titles, but reputation. That's the real currency here. A good throw can sell a week's worth of stock, someone whispers. A bad one, someone else adds, can curse your harvest. Historians still argue whether these contests originated as games, as bets, or as spice-weighing calibration rituals. In the absence of formal scales, some believe traders used ginger tossing as a way to judge weight, density, and freshness all in one motion. Others think it was just something to do after the 9th hour of selling cardamom to indecisive aunts. Whatever the truth, tonight it feels sacred. The 4th round begins, and something strange happens. One player's ginger splits on impact. A clean crack. Silence falls. The crowd leans in. A judge, a woman with a chili necklace and hands stained with fenugreek, lifts the broken piece, examines it, nods. Too dry, she declares. No oil, no fire. The loser nods respectfully. He steps back, hands over his pouch of remaining roots. The victor bows. There are no trophies here, just acknowledgement. And perhaps a few more sales come morning. As the crowd begins to disperse, a man beside you offers a piece of the broken root. Chew it, he says. It'll tell you what kind of day it had. You do. The ginger is mild, lacks that snap of fire, more bark than blaze. A boring root, you say. Exactly, the man chuckles. And no one buys a boring root. You stay seated a moment longer, watching as the lantern flickers in the wind and the dueling ring is swept clear with palm brooms. Another man arrives, younger, with fresh ginger in a bag slung across his back. He begins to practice, alone, throwing each root in a slow arc, adjusting for bounce and spin. Training. Because even in a market of flavors and finance, there are those who specialize in the art of ginger trajectory. You leave the square feeling oddly exhilarated. The ginger duel, as absurd as it sounds,
is a reminder of something deeper. That here, in this fragrant universe, spice is not just commerce. It is play, performance, pride. You walk back toward the heart of the market, your feet lighter now, your pouch swinging gently at your hip. Inside, ginger, clove, cinnamon, cardamom, cumin scroll, saffron whisper, and now a sliver of cracked dual root. Each one a story, each one a flavor. And now, somehow, you begin to taste the memory of them all.
The sky has deepened to a shade of indigo that seems almost deliberate, like the cloths you saw earlier soaking in vats of fermented leaf dye. Stars begin to peep out, shy at first, then bold. The sounds of the spice market have softened, but not ceased. Even in this hour, where most cities sleep or lock their gates, this place only shifts its rhythm. Lanterns flicker on ropes strung between stalls. Small fires crackle beneath clay stoves. Shadows stretch longer, and voices drop into hushed murmurs. Drawn by the glow, you follow the path toward the riverbank, a gentle slope where the edge of the market melts into water. Here, a new kind of bazaar comes alive, one with no stalls, no wagons, no yelling, just slow-moving boats, each swaying gently on the tide, each glowing faintly with lantern light. You've arrived at the floating market. Unlike the spice market above, the boats here don't compete. They drift, tethered loosely to one another, forming a soft constellation of trade. You walk along a rickety wooden pier, and already your nose catches something strange, sweet, herbal, sharp, and faintly smoky. A woman in a narrow canoe offers a jar filled with cinnamon oil, the lid sealed with beeswax. She doesn't speak, just lifts the jar slightly, lets you smell it. You do. It's sharp and clean, with an undertone of something floral. You nod. She nods. No price is mentioned. Not yet. You move on. Another boat sells sachets of burned star anise, wrapped in silk and meant to be lit like incense. The vendor, a young man wearing a scarf patterned like coriander leaves, explains softly that the scent keeps bad dreams away. He lights one for demonstration. It crackles, then smolders, releasing a strange perfume into the night air. Sweet, spicy, and just a little strange. Good for children, he says. Also for ghosts. You're not sure which group you belong to, but you accept a sachet anyway. Further down, a boat draped in marigold garlands offers bowls of rose petal dust mixed with powdered clove and fennel. A woman sprinkles some onto your wrist. It clings like dew. The scent is light, but it unfolds slowly. Rose, then smoke, then a tickle of warmth that lingers in your skin like memory. She explains it's for letters. For writing, you ask? For scenting, she replies. So your message stays long after your words fade. It strikes you that these merchants are not selling food or even utility. They are selling presence, fragrance as echo, spice as soul print. Historians often overlook these parts of trade, the nocturnal markets, the sensory economies that don't fit cleanly into ledgers or treaties. Floating stalls, scented ghost repellent, clove-dusted rose parchment. These are not things found in cargo logs, yet here they are, real, inhalable, essential. You sit at the edge of the pier, feet dangling above the water, which smells faintly of cardamom and silt. A boy approaches with a bowl of warm milk, infused with ginger and crushed fenugreek. He offers it wordlessly. You accept. It tastes like fire tucked inside velvet. You sip slowly. All around you, the boats rock. Lanterns sway. Shadows shift. People drift between vessels, not to buy, but to breed. To sample time, pressed into oil and ash. Across the water,
A storyteller sits cross-legged in the middle of a large flat-bottomed barge. Children curl around him like petals, and his voice drifts on the breeze. You don't hear all the words, just the rhythm, the pulse. You catch a few fragments. And the pepper merchant's daughter, cloves sewn into her wedding sari. He followed the scent all the way to the temple, a market of stories told in spice and vapor. You rise and walk once more. A boat glides past with no cargo, only sound. Wind chimes made of dried lemongrass stalks and cardamom pods. They jingle softly, barely above a whisper. A woman leans from the boat and smiles. Want one? You nod. She tosses you a bundle tied with thin rope. You catch it easily. It smells green, alive, wild. For your doorway, to remind your house how to dream. You thank her as the boat drifts away, disappearing into the black ink of the river, the chimes still humming. Your pouch is nearly full now. It carries not just objects, but moments. A clove from a merchant's circle, a ginger root that broke mid-duel, a cinnamon coin, a cumin ledger, a jaggery pyramid, a bundle of lemongrass chimes, each one a node in your own quiet constellation of this day. And here on the riverbank, under a sky stitched with stars, you realize something simple but profound. Spice is not just about heat, or taste, or wealth. It is about memory, about what lingers, what floats, what perfumes the air long after the person is gone. You breathe in deeply, star anise, river silt, burning rose, and know that you'll carry this scent, this moment, far beyond this market, because some places stay with you, even when you leave them.
You remain seated on the edge of the pier a while longer, letting the breeze off the river cool your skin. The stars above shimmer like powdered sugar scattered across indigo silk, and the water below reflects their light in soft, broken fragments. Lanterns drift lazily across the surface, tied to boats, tethered to nothing but gentle intention. Every breath you take is thick with cinnamon, lemongrass, and the faintest trace of charred wood. The floating market continues its quiet ballet around you. Boats pass without sound. People move like shadows. Even laughter is muffled, as if the very river insists on keeping its secrets hushed. You begin to think that nothing more could surprise you, until you see a light, soft and steady, glowing behind a curtain of hanging ginger roots. It's not a boat, exactly. It's more like a raft, low and flat, barely afloat. Atop it sits a solitary figure, wrapped in faded saffron robes, seated cross-legged beneath a thin bamboo canopy. Before him, arranged with symmetrical precision, are 6 shallow wooden trays filled with star anise. You step closer. He doesn't move. His eyes are closed, his posture perfect, his breathing slower than the river. A small placard in front of him, written in charcoal on cloth, reads, "No voice, no bargain. Offer what you carry." You're unsure what it means. Is this a shrine? A stall? A joke? The man does not blink. He reaches forward without opening his eyes and gently lifts a single pod of star anise from the central tray. He rolls it between his fingers, then lays it on a square of silk and pushes it forward, toward you. You hesitate, then reach into your pouch. You pass over a dried clove, the one you'd been given under the tamarind tree, the one that cracked in your palm during the gossip circle. He nods slowly, as if this is the right offering. You sit across from him, knees touching the cool raft boards, and pick up the star anise. It's perfect. 8 symmetrical points, each holding a seed that glints slightly in the lantern light. You hold it to your nose. It smells of licorice, warmth, and something harder to place, like memory, or snowfall, or ink. Still without speaking, the man reaches into a pouch at his hip and withdraws a small ceramic jar. He uncorks it, taps it once,
and pours a small pile of black sand into a wooden bowl. Then, with the very tip of a dried ginger stalk, he begins to draw in the sand. You lean forward. A symbol takes shape. A swirl. A path. A doorway? You're not sure.
But it feels familiar. Is it writing? You whisper, forgetting for a moment that he does not speak. He does not answer, but he draws again. This time, a circle. Within it, a pod. Then 8 dots, then a wavy line. You realize it's a map, a flavor, of trade, of seasons. Historians still debate the roles of these silent monks in the spice markets of medieval India. Some say they were former traders who took vows of stillness, offering silent consultation in matters of trade. Others believe they were flavor priests, dedicating their lives to the perfection of a single spice, treating each pod and seed as a sacred text to be studied and preserved. The man before you seems to confirm both theories. You ask, quietly, why star anise? He does not answer, but he lifts the pod you gave him, the cracked clove, and sets it beside the star anise. Then he points to both, then to the sand, then to the water. You think about it. Clove is heat, intensity, a burst of fire. Star anise is cold, depth, a long unfolding. Together, they balance. Trade, after all, is not just about transaction. It's about conversation, not just among people, but among spices. Some shout, some sing, some whisper. He pours the sand back into its jar, covers the tray, bows once, and then, as quietly as he arrived, he unties the raft and lets it drift away. You watch him float away, lantern flickering behind the veil of ginger roots, star anise glinting in the moonlight. You sit for a long time. Eventually, a woman steps onto the pier and takes the monk's place. She carries a shallow bowl filled with pods, nutmeg this time. She smiles. His brother, she says softly. He's been silent 12 years. You smile back. And you? She shrugs. Only 2. I still talk. She offers you a slice of dried orange soaked in nutmeg syrup. You bite into it. The flavor is strange. Sweet, cold, spicy. It lingers on your tongue like a hymn. You thank her, bow lightly, and begin the slow walk back up the hill, away from the floating market. In your pouch, the star anise rests now beside the rest. You don't label it. You don't need to. Some flavors carry their own names inside them, and tonight you learn to listen.
As you begin the slow climb back toward the main market from the riverbank, the path curls through the base of a crumbling wall draped in night-blooming jasmine. The flowers have opened since sunset, their scent thick and sweet, winding into the already complex air like an afterthought. Soft, almost bashful next to the boldness of cinnamon, ginger, and clove. The market itself has grown quieter now, not empty, but subdued. Most stalls have lowered their awnings, and flickering lanterns have replaced the midday blaze. The only sounds are those of last-minute haggling, of quiet laughter, of footsteps on stone. You pass by the cardamom lady's stall, closed now, her wares packed away in jars resting like dozing cats beneath woven cloth. You keep walking. You're not quite ready to leave, and neither, it seems, is the market. At the very end of a lane you hadn't noticed before, you see a low structure with a crooked roof and a leaning wooden sign. On it, scratched faintly in faded dye, Spice Ledgers of the Forgotten. Curiosity pulls you forward. Inside, the space is dim, lit by a single oil lamp. The walls are lined with scrolls, not of paper or parchment, but of palm leaves, banana skin, and beaten bark. A table rests at the center, and behind it sits an old woman with skin like nutmeg and eyes like burnt sugar. Her fingers are stained with ink and turmeric, and before her lies an enormous open book, its pages made of pressed leaves, its writing etched with such care that even the margins seem reverent. She doesn't look up when you enter. Instead, she keeps writing, her pen, a quill made from lemongrass, gliding slowly across the page. You wait. She finishes a sentence, then another, then sets the pen down gently and lifts her gaze. "Looking for your name?" she asks, her voice rasped but clear. You blink. "My name?" She gestures to the wall behind her. Hundreds of scrolls hang there, each tagged with a tiny clay token bearing a symbol: chili, turmeric root, peppercorn, coriander leaf, mace flower. "These are the forgotten ledgers," she says, "accounts that were never balanced, debts that dissolved into memory, promises that no longer have mouths to repeat them." You take a slow step forward. Some scrolls are faded, others look recently added. All of them emit a faint fragrance, dry spice, time, dust, and perhaps the lightest touch of memory itself. She says, "I record them before they disappear completely." You ask how she gets the stories.
"They find me," she replies, "in whispers, in smells, in the silence after a spice is touched but not bought." You try not to disturb the stillness as you approach her desk. She closes the leaf book slowly and opens another. This one is different, smaller, bound with thread dipped in clove oil. On its cover is an old brass button, tied with a thread of jaggery-stained cotton. "Every so often," she says, "someone like you comes." You don't interrupt. She lifts a pouch from beneath the desk, smaller than yours, frayed at the edges, its drawstring long gone. She spills its contents onto the desk. Inside, a half-crushed clove, a torn slip of turmeric-stained fabric, a pinch of dried mint, and a note, written in curving script on banana leaf. "One dead of pepper, left in kindness." She looks at you. "What have you gathered?" You reach into your pouch. One by one, you lay your objects on the table. The cinnamon-coated coin, the cracked clove from the gossip ring, the ginger root from the midnight duel, the cumin scroll inked in your own hand, the jaggery pyramid wrapped in silence, the star anise gifted without a word, the cardamom pod you never used, the bundle of lemongrass chimes from the drifting boat, and now your newest, a sliver of dried nutmeg soaked in orange syrup. She examines them without touching. Her eyes pause longest on the cumin scroll. "You wrote this," she says. You nod. "You traded for none of these?" You shake your head. "Only stories." She smiles. "Good," she says. "That's how the market remembers itself." She lifts the cumin scroll, holds it to her nose. "Still smells of ink and humility," she murmurs. Then she returns to the book and opens to a blank page. "What shall I write of you?" You hesitate. She waits. Finally, you say softly, "I didn't buy, I didn't sell, I only listened." She writes, "One who wandered with empty pockets and left with a full breath, took no coin but accepted flavor, paid in stillness, witnessed ginger fall and sugar harden, and silence whisper through oil. Name unknown, debt none, legacy, aroma." You watch the ink dry. She folds the leaf page, seals it with a speck of melted jaggery wax, and places it inside a pouch marked only with a star-shaped spice symbol. Then, gently, she ties the pouch shut and adds it to the wall. It swings once, softly, then rests. Your name,
whatever it is, has joined the forgotten, and yet you have never felt more remembered. As you leave, she calls after you one last time. Don't let it fade too fast. You know what she means. Not the memory, the scent. You step into the cool night. The market is quieter now. The last fires are dimming, the stalls are shuttering. The smells are softer, less eager, more reflective. Even the jasmine has begun to close its petals, exhausted from the day's storytelling. You walk slowly, your pouch lighter, your lungs full. You're no longer just a visitor. You're a spice carrier now, a witness, a page in a book with no index and endless margin notes. And you know, the market never really closes. It only pauses briefly to breathe.
The night has settled like warm cloth across the shoulders of the market. The air, no longer bustling with layered aromas, has quieted into something subtler, a lingering perfume of saffron smoke, faint coriander dust, and the last whispers of ghee from evening hearths. Lamps flicker dimly now, their wicks dancing low in their clay bowls. The voices have grown softer, the footfalls fewer. You walk slowly, careful not to disturb the gentle hush. You pass a row of shuttered stalls. Some are covered with woven mats, others with loose cloth tied hastily as their owners hurried home. A few have left their ledgers open beside burnt-down incense sticks, as if the day's numbers might drift upward into the night and sort themselves out by morning. A final breeze stirs the street, and you hear a dry rustle, a soft tapping. You follow the sound to the edge of a building where a bamboo shutter swings lazily, revealing a narrow doorway. You step through. Inside is a small, low-lit space that smells of old pages, dried fruit, and something else, perhaps fennel, perhaps ashes. The floor is covered in woven mats. In the center, a brazier glowing faintly. Around it sit 4 people. They look up as you enter, but do not speak. One gestures toward a folded mat. You sit. Before you can ask, someone places a bowl in your hands. It's warm. You lift it gently. Inside, spiced milk, thick, pale, flecked with cardamom seeds. A single star anise pod floating like a memory. You sip. It is quiet. Then, one of the elders speaks. "Tell yours," he says, gesturing to your pouch. You glance down. For a moment, you hesitate. You are not a trader. You brought no wares. You bought no sacks. You bartered only in breath and attention. But your hands are not empty. Slowly, you place each object on the mat before you. The cinnamon coin, dulled now but still fragrant. The cracked clove, reminder of gossip and truth. The ginger root, splintered from midnight mischief. The cumin ledger leaf, written with your own hand. The jaggery pyramid, softening at the edges. The star anise from the silent monk's raft. The cardamom pod that never opened. The lemongrass chimes, now quiet in the still air. The thread-wrapped bangle, still warm at your wrist. The nutmeg shard, soaked in orange and dusk. And the final sachet of rose and fennel dust, unopened, resting like a sigh. And finally, the clay-stamped pouch from the scribe of the forgotten.
You say nothing at first. Then you speak, softly, slowly, as if reading aloud from a page you hadn't known you carried. I walked the market. I didn't buy, I didn't sell, but I remembered. Every cent, every hand, every root and pod. I let them in, and they changed me. The others nod. One places a bowl of ash beside your objects. Into it, he drops a single clove. Memory, he says. Another drops in a piece of dried turmeric. Purpose.
she says. A third adds a pinch of dried coriander. Laughter. The last adds a curl of cinnamon bark. Debt, he murmurs. The kind we don't pay in coin. You understand. They gesture for you to do the same. You reach down, choose the pod of unopened cardamom. You hold it for a long breath, then drop it into the ash. Listening, you whisper. Silence follows, warm and full. Outside, the market sighs. A shutter slams gently in the wind. Somewhere, a dog coughs once and goes back to sleep. You sip again from your bowl. The milk is cooling now. The star anise floats in circles. You feel your pulse slow to match its rhythm. One of the elders takes the remaining spice objects, carefully, respectfully, and wraps them in cloth dyed with turmeric. He ties it with ginger root fiber and places it beside you. For tomorrow, he says. You nod. You rise. And you leave. As you step back into the quiet lanes, you realize the market is not dead. It is dreaming. Every shuttered stall still breathes. Every empty bowl still echoes with spice. The air is thick with the residue of 1,000 exchanges, each one tiny but vital, each one part of a longer, slower story. You cross the now empty square where saffron once glinted. You pass the wall where the forgotten ledgers hang like prayer flags. You nod at the closed door of the Cardamom Widow, the sleeping parrot overhead, the place where the camel caravan once jingled past. And then, at the edge of the market, you turn once more. You inhale deeply. What do you smell? All of it. And none of it. Because now, it's inside you. The spices. The stories. The silence. The night folds around you like the final page of a long letter. And you walk on, never quite leaving the market at all.
And now, dear listener, the lanterns have dimmed. The market of spices, once bursting with color, scent, and sound, has exhaled its last breath for the night. You've wandered far, from the midday bustle of cinnamon coins and clove-tipped ledgers, through the strange rituals of ginger duels and silent anise monks, to the quiet river where stories drift like smoke on the tide. With each step, you gathered more than just fragrant tokens. You collected traces of lives, of trades and tales that most will never know. A market like this does not call out loudly. It waits for those who walk slowly, who pause, who notice the weight of saffron dust on silk or the tremble of nutmeg in firelight. So now, let your body rest. Feel the stillness settle around you like silk. Breathe in, softly, through your nose, and let the memory of cardamom and rose linger at the back of your mind. Let the night-blooming jasmine remind your lungs what it means to drift. Let the cumin scrolls and turmeric stains fold into the dreamscape that's already waiting just beyond your closed eyelids. The spice market will still be there, tomorrow or the next day, in the corners of your memory, like a scent you can't place, or a story half remembered. For now, you have nothing to trade, nothing to carry, only sleep. Slow, steady, sweet.